One of my favorite things about the stories in our ancient Israelite and Judean writings is that the concept of giving a gift or an offering to the Almighty was not imposed upon humankind from the top down, but completely arose from the heart. Cain and Hevel didn't inherit any kind of developed system. They didn't have rituals and rites and ceremonies. There was just something about being alive, about having nefesh chaim, the breath of life, about being in a world surrounded by life and by nature, a world that their parents told them had been created by a creator. And so Cain, the first person ever born, was so moved to offer up to this creator a gift, an initiative which arose from deep within. Fast forward, give or take 50 generations or so, and everything would be different. For the Israelite priests, in yearning, like Cain and Hevel long before them, to be in direct relationship with the Almighty, would develop an incredibly intricate system of rules and regulations and hierarchies and categories. And that makes sense. When we're dealing with the divine, details matter. And if you love something and want to be devoted to it in heart, mind, and with every single breath, it would make sense to cherish those details and make sure everything is exactly as it should be. But of course, there's a risk, right? One that the prophets speak to time and time again. This upcoming Sabbath, the first section of the collected oracles of the prophet Malachi will be chanted in many traditional Sabbath prayer spaces. I want to look at just one line for now. Quote, "A son honors his father, a servant his master. But if I am a father, where is my honor? You only bring me your lame beasts and your sickly beasts and your blind beasts. And you say, oh, there's nothing wrong. But I sniff this with disdain." Okay, realize that Malachi's oracles are the very last out of all those that would be included in the Tanakh collection. Now, let's rewind for a moment to nearly half a millennium before, to the other side of the timeline, the very beginning of our literary prophets, where we find the four greats, the pillars of the 9th century BCE, one of which was Isaiah. So with Malachi's voice in the background, listen to what Isaiah had to say, also in his first chapter. Quote, "Sons I have nurtured and sons I have raised, but they have rebelled against me. So what do I need your offerings for? I have had it with the burnt offerings of rams and the suet of fatted beasts." Think about this. We have here two bookends, Isaiah and Malachi. Malachi, all the way at the very end, is playing with some of the same imagery that comes up all the way in the first chapter of Isaiah, back at the beginning, the rebellious son, the critique of offerings. But there's a hugely important difference. Isaiah would go on to say that the offerings in and of themselves were splendid, actually. The cows were fattened. The delectable suets would be included. They were accompanied by an abundance of prayer. The problem was the hypocrisy. The Israelites and Judeans would feign piety while in the temple precinct. But when outside of the immediate vicinity of El Rahum Wechanun, they would do even worse than ignore the plight of the poor, the plight of the downtrodden, the oppressed. They themselves would participate in the exploitation. This, the ever-loving and ever-compassionate one, would find repulsive. Fast forward to Malachi, 400 years later, and now they're no longer even acting. They no longer bring the fatted, the healthy, the clean, but now their sacrifices consist of the ones they probably would not have even eaten themselves, those blemished in every way. The Mizbeach, if you can imagine, had become akin to a garbage pile. The sacrificial system was meant to foster a real, a lively, and deep and intimate connection between Israel and her Elohim. And maybe it did at first, but it would all become rote. And after centuries of continued degradation, even after exile and redemption, the action of throwing something onto a fire pit would usurp completely that which bringing an offering once upon a time had been meant to accomplish. Adonai himself banished, replaced with a stack of stones, some bloods, greasy fats, and the system that had been intended to be the means by which the El Elyon would be worshipped and celebrated and adored by his people had degenerated into idolatry, with these rote motions being the very deity they were all serving. Like the Israelites and like the Judeans, I myself have always had my beloved systems. And then earlier this year, like everyone else throughout the world, COVID just barged in and wrenched everything apart. So many of the things I had taken comfort in, had relied on for stability, for consistency, that I turned to for assurance that my life was heading in the right direction and that I'm right with the world around me and with my Elohim, they were gone. And so I had to rebuild. And in doing so, I found myself at times unable to do things I thought I would always do, as well as compelled at other times to do things I thought I would never do. And you know what this did? This shook me out of my complacency completely. And with the defense mechanisms of complacency and systems breached outright, certain passages in our ancient writings would suddenly be able to impact with a force I had never imagined. There is a 6th century prophet, a poetic giant, actually, whose name we don't even know. And therefore, I like to call him the Herald of Zion from Mivaser Tzion. Others call him Deutero Isaiah. He announced that there are well springs, which are ever flowing with the sweetest of waters and are readily available at no charge to anyone and everyone who just thirsts. That's it. Thirsts. But if you've told yourself enough times that your system works, your system is foolproof, you probably won't thirst. With the words of the Herald of Zion ringing in my ears, I had to come to terms with the fact that, at least in my own life, the truth of this was everywhere I looked. I had mastered a few systems, but I wasn't living for the El Elyon, had not been yearning, panting for him, like a deer pants for water, and therefore never experienced the sense of isolation or utter agony of Hester Panim. And it's that very broken heart of loneliness which can be the most powerful tool to wield in the relentless pursuit of El Shaddai, giving someone the strength to break through and finally experience that joy, the sweetness of his real and palpable presence, and basking in that warmth. Which of our systems are we truly intentional about? Which ones are successfully filling their intended purpose? Which ones have long since become rote and are maybe now less than helpful? What can be salvaged? What must be replaced outright, as difficult as that might be? And finally, if something were to happen that would send all of our systems crashing, which ones would be worth collecting the pieces of and rebuilding as they were? And which ones wouldn't be? I'm going to now invite you all to respond to my recitation of Kaddish, in which together we will praise and sanctify the El Elyon's name. But rather than reciting it in an early first millennium literary jargon Aramaic, I'm going to recite it in English. It's not an exact translation. You might notice that I've made some slight changes. As I see it, that's unavoidable in offering prayer from the heart. And one more thing. You've probably noticed by now that it's my personal preference and practice to default to masculine singular pronouns for the Almighty. That's what I'm comfortable with. But please feel free to respond as you are comfortable, be it speaking of his name or her name or its name or their name. However it is that you conceive of the Kadosh Yisrael, the Holy One of Israel, in your mind and in your heart, please feel free to answer accordingly. I'll give you all a moment to unmute yourselves as I share my screen so you can all read along with me. May his great name be exalted and be hallowed.
Amen.
Amen.
In the world that he created, according to his will, may he give reign to his kingship in our lifetimes, in our days, in the lives of all of Israel, swiftly and soon, and say Amen.
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 May
His great name be blessed
ever and ever.
Ever and ever.
May his great name be blessed forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. May his name be blessed, praised, glorified, exalted, extolled, made mighty, appraised and lauded the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he.
Blessed be he.
Above and far beyond any blessing and song, praise, consolation that are uttered throughout the whole world, and say Amen.
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 Upon all of Israel, wherever in the world any Israelites or Judeans or Jews may be found, all those who cherish the words of the prophets and the scribes and the poets and the storytellers of our people of yore. May we and may they have abundant peace and grace and kindness and mercy, long life, ample nourishment, and salvation from our Father Almighty. Amen.
Amen.
May he who makes peace throughout all the heavens make peace upon us and upon all of Israel and the whole world. Oseh shalom b'mromao, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen.
Amen.
Amen.